One player who I always talk about when someone asks me who is the most underrated player, one of the guys who I always bring up is Andy Dalton, because I do feel like for whatever reason he's always gotten a ton of hate, and I feel like it's been a ton of undeserved hate. I mean, this guy was an MVP candidate at one point in his career, you can't get around that, so this guy is clearly at least a somewhat talented player, you can't argue that. But I'm putting him higher than guys like Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, and Josh Allen for several reasons. His stats aren't necessarily super crazy. I mean, he was actually only 35th best in points gained per snap, which isn't really that great. But at the same time, I do feel like what he puts on tape is a lot different than just what his stat totals are, and so let's just jump into it. One thing I like about Dalton is he does all of the little things right. That's kind of what makes him, that's kind of his selling point as a quarterback. Maybe he won't be making the flashy plays that someone like Aaron Rodgers might make. He's not going to be making many no-look passes like Patrick Mahomes, but at the end of the day, those kind of plays don't really have to happen too often. Really, you want to have a guy who can make the little plays right consistently, and that is the kind of thing that Andy Dalton can do. Like on this one, it's going to be a pretty simple idea, where it's going to be a cover one hole, and that's going to be the route that Andy Dalton is going to look to throw to. It's going to be just in between those two coverages right in the middle of the screen. And as you see, once this play develops, this is actually going to work out pretty well, as the receiver is in pretty good position to cut inside and pick up some yards. Not to mention, there is a pretty significant gap in between a linebacker and a safety, so there definitely is some room for Andy Dalton to make this throw, and he is going to make this throw, and it results in a solid completion. So again, nothing too crazy, but he got the job done. And also, one of the things I liked about that throw was he really hit his receiver exactly where he would have to hit him. He hit his receiver right in his hands, and that allowed his receiver to pick up more yards after the catch, whereas if that throw was a little bit inaccurate, it might have still been a catch, but it might not have been for as many yards as it ended up being. And there's also this one, where it's going to be a cover one blitz, and they have a receiver running right there, just 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, and it's an easy way to beat cover one blitz, because there's no one in the middle of the screen, and there's a quick cut in it, which is great against man coverage. This is a 9 out of 10. This is 9 times out of 10 this play is going to work, and so Andy Dalton is going to feel very comfortable about trying to make this throw. However, when the play actually breaks down, it doesn't quite work out as perfectly as you might want it to. While yes, the receiver now is very easily open and has clearly won his one-on-one matchup, it was an easy matchup to win anyways because of his route, but even with that, he was able to win it pretty easily and has a ton of space. However, the other problem is going to be that Carolina Panther right there. He's in charge of making sure that he's covering the tight end who's on the top half of the screen, but since that tight end is blocking, he's actually going to drop back into coverage a little bit and keep his head up and basically just look at Andy Dalton and see if there's going to be a throw. So if he ran out in a certain direction, this now could allow Andy Dalton to have plenty of space to make a throw. However, since he is right there, this now means that there's a lot less space. It's kind of one of those things where on paper this works out perfectly, however in practice sometimes things don't work out exactly as planned. If you watched my Jameis Winston video, I kind of talk about how sometimes he will see these kind of situations and just throw the ball instantly because he thought it was going to work on, because he saw what was going to happen on paper, but then because something else happened that was not how it was supposed to work out, the play ended up not working out and he throws an interception or something like that. But one of the main reasons I have Andy Dalton higher than Jameis Winston is because he has a tendency to not do things like that. As you see, he does complete the pass. He is patient on that one. He takes his time. A lot of guys kind of rush those types of throws when they see to have someone open, but Andy Dalton very smartly did not, makes a good throw, and it results in a completion. But it is not all good from Andy Dalton. There is a reason why I have him at number 22 and not anywhere higher, even though I am talking a lot about what I like about Andy Dalton, and he will just have some head-scratching decisions from time to time and some head-scratching throws from time to time. Like on this one, it's going to be a cover 4 zone, and to have a receiver running a deep route, and against a cover 4 zone, you want to throw stuff shallow. You want to try to get just a few yards on a cover 4 zone because you can't really pick up these big gains because there's going to be 4 people playing deep and only 3 people playing shallow. And also, as you see, once this play actually starts going on, it's actually going to look even worse because there are 2 Carolina Panthers in the area and only 1 Cincinnati Bengals, so Andy Dalton should really not make this throw. But he's going to try it anyways, and maybe that wouldn't have even been that bad except for the fact that he also terribly missed the throw and it was picked off. I actually don't think that's a huge indicator of who Andy Dalton is as a player. I would say that he's a pretty accurate quarterback for the most part, but like everyone, he does make some mistakes, and that one was definitely a big mistake. Not just physically, but mentally as well. And that was kind of a rare combination of not making the correct decision and also not making a good throw. This one's another example of that. It's a cover 1 blitz, and Cincinnati has a receiver running a go route right there in the bottom half of the screen, and it's actually a decent way to beat a cover 1 blitz because on a play like this, the one safety who's deep can only guard one side of the screen, which means that if you do have someone going deep, potentially they could be near the sidelines far enough that the safety won't be able to get over. But you do have to pay attention to the Saints safety because if you see, the receiver who is trying to get open is actually in pretty decent position right now. He's only a little bit behind the defensive back, and he has more momentum going to the right side of the screen, so this is definitely a good situation for Cincinnati, except for one thing. New Orleans' safety is doing a very good job of reading Andy Dalton, realizing where he's going to make this throw, and breaking to the bottom half of the screen, and Andy Dalton doesn't notice this. They had another receiver on the bottom half of the screen, so if Andy Dalton realized this and threw it to the top half of the screen, maybe it could have worked. However, he throws it there instead, and it ends up being intercepted. And not just that, but it got taken all the way back inside Cincinnati's own 20, and you you can only give him so much blame for that one. It's not like he practices special teams and punt returns. It's not really too much of his fault that the Saints defenders did a good job of blocking and basically playing punt return there. But it is his fault for just allowing the Saints to have the ball in the first place, and also kind of throwing it up there where there could be a good return, and also just throwing it up there in general because he didn't have to do that. Now, in fairness, that last play and also this next play were both from that New Orleans Saints game where they got blown out by a lot. At this point, they were actually down 28-7 with only 24 seconds left in the first half, so maybe Andy Dalton just figured, hey, why not take a shot? And I actually do kind of think that there is some logic there. However, again, he didn't have to take a shot to the bottom half of the screen. He could have taken a shot to the top half of the screen because there was a receiver who was maybe going to get open there instead. Again, would he have been able to win that 50-50 ball and get a touchdown? It's hard to say, who knows. But it at least wouldn't have ended up being an interception and points for the Saints. There was also this next play, and again, that whole game just didn't go well for Cincinnati. That was kind of one of the burn to tape games for the Bengals. But what happened was it's a cover 2 zone, and to have a receiver running that route right there, which will be beneath those initial zones in coverage. And so once this play happens, it's actually just working out pretty well. There is a Bengal who's going to be open, and Andy Dalton is already in throwing motion. He's already getting ready to make a throw in that direction. However, he just misses it wide. I'm not sure if they weren't on the same page there or if he just had a bad throw, but either way, it's a bad play from Andy Dalton. The ownership for those kind of things do fall onto him. I mean, obviously, if it was just a missed throw, then of course the ownership falls on him. But if he wasn't on the same page with his receiver, well, then that always is at least in part on the quarterback as well. You know, admittedly, I am being a little bit nitpicky here. I mean, the reality is there isn't a lot Andy Dalton does wrong. He does a lot of things right. A lot of people will say that he's kind of consistently mediocre, and there is kind of some truth to that. However, he will have some very big games. I mean, people forget the Bengals did start off 5-1, and one of the most impressive Andy Dalton games was against Atlanta. It was a fun game to watch, seeing him and Matt Ryan duel it out, and here was one of those plays. It's going to be a cover 2 man, and they have a receiver running that route right there. So, you know, oftentimes me on this channel and a lot of other people on their own YouTube channels or television shows will try to, you know, get into the X's and O's and try to figure out this is what you have to do and that's what you have to do. But honestly, often in man coverage, a lot of times it's just as simple as who's the more talented player, and can the wide receiver gain some separation, or will the defensive back not allow any separation? And as you see right here, there is not a ton of separation, but a little bit. The one key way this play can work is if Andy Dalton can get it over that defensive player, because if he does, this now means that the wide receiver is basically the only one who can see the ball. The defensive player has to turn his back and run to the right side of the screen, meanwhile Cincinnati's receiver can look back and look up at the ball. So that's what Dalton does. He puts it in a perfect spot and allows his receiver AJ Green to come down and make that catch. And you know, it does help Andy Dalton that he has a guy like AJ Green. That is definitely something that helps him. But, you know, it's not like he was a young Matt Stafford before he came into the player that he was now, just constantly throwing it up to Calvin Johnson. I mean, it's not like AJ Green only makes Andy Dalton better, they make each other better. Another play from that same game was this one, where it's going to be a cover 2 man, and those are the routes that the Cincinnati Bengals receivers will be running. There's several routes that could get open, however, the out route on the top half of the screen, that's probably the route that has the biggest chance of getting open, just because there is a cut and it's breaking to the outside, so there definitely is some space where potentially Andy Dalton could make a throw. But as you see right now, just neither one of those two receivers were really able to gain too much separation, and so those are two routes that Andy Dalton would probably try to throw to, but he just isn't going to be able to do it there because the receivers weren't able to win their one-on-one matchup. But notice how Dalton, despite stat, is still able to scramble outside the pocket, run over, and pick up a decent gain, despite the fact that that play did not work out at all when it was supposed to work out. Again, no one's going to compare this guy to, you know, Lamar Jackson or anything, but he does have some ability to run with the football, and he's a smart enough player where he can figure out when he should run with the football. Again, that's far from the key point of his game, but it is something that he can do from time to time. It's something he did there. I mean, you know, again, lesser quarterbacks would have still tried to force a throw there, and it could have even been intercepted, but he was smart enough to not do that, and a lot of quarterbacks would have also just thrown it away, so at least he found some way to get a positive gain out of a play that really had no business being a positive gain. One last play from that Falcons game is going to be this one, where it's a cover 1 hole, and those are the two routes that the Cincinnati Bengals receivers will be running on the bottom half of the screen, but there's actually going to be a blown coverage on this play. That's actually what I want to talk about. As you see right here, that Falcon is going to actually be the key guy to watch here, because it looks like he's going to actually call for a switch. Because he sees that the Cincinnati Bengals receivers' routes are crossing over each other, this now means that basically they're going to be not in as good a position, but if they switch, they can be in a much better position if they can do it flawlessly. Because, I mean, if you take a look at that Falcon right there, he is very close to the Bengal. However, the problem is, at this point, the Bengal is basically adjacent with him. He's only 1 yard further to the left side of the screen than the Falcon is, meaning that when he's running deep downfield, he actually has a better chance to pick up a decent gain. The switch did not work out as planned, but but notice how Dalton realizes it, makes the throw at the perfect spot, and it leads to a touchdown. That's also a tough throw too, because he has to get there quickly since there is a safety in the area, but he was able to get it there quickly, and that's why they were able to get a touchdown out of it. Dalton's an interesting guy, and honestly, the Cincinnati Bengals are an interesting team. I'm greatly looking forward to seeing what they're going to do now that they don't have Marvin Lewis as the head coach, because he was there for so long. Now, how much will that actually change things? I don't know. Maybe not at all, but it also definitely could change some things, so we'll just have to wait and see what happens.